Good morning, everyone, to a very early morning press briefing on the taxonomy, the so-called taxonomy setting criteria for sustainable investments. And we want to explain today why we urge the Commission to exclude nuclear and gas from these standards for sustainable investments and rather invest in the Green Deal and green transition with and in clean energy. We are very happy to have here remotely Carole Dieschbourg. She's a Luxembourg Minister for Climate, Environment and Sustainable Development. We also have here Greens EFA President Ska Keller. We have here Yannick Jadot, who will give a perspective from a French perspective from the Greens EFA, and remotely we have here Sven Giegold, who will give us a German perspective from the Greens EFA side. After a short introduction, we are happy to take your questions. This is all on the record, if not indicated otherwise. And I'm happy to give the floor first to Ska and then to Minister Dieschbourg.
Thank you, Pia, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us online and offline. Let's just recall what the situation is we're in. We have all understood and agreed that we have a massive climate crisis that we need to address. We need to get to a path of limiting the global warming to 1.5 degrees. And this is not something that we say here. It's something that was internationally agreed in the Paris Agreement. Now, the European Union has put forward a Fit for 55 plan in order to make sure that we are put on the right path. We have a climate law in the European Union that aims to reduce emissions by at least 55% by 2030. We are planning to reach climate neutrality. All of those things we have agreed on, and I want to stress again, the Paris Agreement is something that all states have signed up to, and it's something we all have agreed to work towards too. Now, the taxonomy can be and should be an important plan on this because it sets the guidelines into what banks and others can and should invest if they want to call it green investment. Because there is a lot of demand for green investment, so there should also be clear criteria, because else those banks will just call anything green investment. And that's exactly the point of the taxonomy, to define what is green investment, what is sustainable investment. So if we now open it up to unsustainable things, obviously it loses its whole meaning. If you just include everything into sustainable, then it's just greenwashing, and it's not fulfilling the purpose, and it's sending us totally off track again if we want to reach the Paris Agreement, which we have all said we want to. So this is the problem at stake, and that's what we want to address today in this press conference. But of course, it's also something that we work on very much in the European Parliament to prevent a greenwashing, because gas and nuclear simply is not sustainable. It's not renewable, it's not clean, and it's not the way into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ska. And now I'm happy to give the floor to Minister Dieschbourg. Carole, the floor is yours.
Colleagues, it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Just coming back from COP26, where together with colleagues from ministers from Austria, Germany, Portugal, and Denmark, we made this clear statement about the importance of having a good and credible taxonomy. So I'm very happy to be today with you, because for Luxembourg, it is very clear that neither nuclear nor gas can be labeled and marketed as sustainable technology. Their inclusion in the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy would permanently damage the integrity, and fully with Ska when she said it would damage the credibility and therefore also the usefulness of this very important taxonomy. So many savers and investors would lose faith in financial products marketed as sustainable if they had the fear that by buying these products, they would finance nuclear power or gas investments. So on nuclear, focusing on this, for Luxembourg, it's clear this is not part of the solution to the climate crisis, because nuclear power is too risky, first. Second, too slow and too expensive. So too risky it's very clear that for Luxembourg, nuclear is a high-risk technology. There are risks in operations, risk for waste management, storage, and also external factors. So these risks can mean a significant impact on the environment, but also on people, and this for a very, very long time. So secondly, it's too slow. In COP26, we stated very clear how important the path to climate neutrality is and this decade is. So to keep the 1.5 degree temperature in reach, a deep transformation is needed with already in this decade. And this nuclear power cannot deliver because every single reactor shows that the time of construction is exceeded and they are not delivering. The technology is not ready. And the third point is really far too expensive. We are locking in money that we really need for sustainable solutions. This is clear for nuclear. And let me say a word on gas. So gas is a fossil fuel. It cannot, 2021, a fossil fuel, a sustainable fuel. So it's really focusing on that, what is really sustainable and not locking money. And as Ska mentioned already, there are the solutions: renewable energy, energy efficiency, storage, interconnection, and infrastructure that are flexible and smart. So we have building blocks before us, dear friends. So we are at a crucial point, because what we are speaking about is really if the EU wants to play a leading role, being a front runner on a worldwide scale, we need to safeguard the integrity of our taxonomy, because other regions will have this as yes, a piece of their inspiration. So including nuclear and gas in the taxonomy is really not credible. And that's why we think that if it's included, this represents a labeling fraud. It would undermine private and institutional investors' trust, defeat the very purpose of the taxonomy, which is transparency and trust. And with these words, I would like to give you back and thank you very much for this initiative.
Thank you very much. And now I'm happy to give the floor to Sven Giegold.
Greetings from Berlin. I have to leave very soon for the proceedings ongoing here at the moment. But what I would like to say is the following. The ambition of the European Union was to build a capital markets union and a banking union as a leading marketplace for sustainable finance. The market standard is that green financial products are free of nuclear and free of gas. This is the market standard introduced by banks, insurance companies everywhere. Also in France, we have an even semi-public green finance label, Greenfin, and this label is, of course, with the approval of the French government, free of nuclear and free of gas and coal anyway. So therefore, there is a big danger now that the project of building a sustainable finance market in Europe is put in a totally ridiculous state, because we are falling behind with our democratic standards what the market standard has already constructed. And therefore, the push to put nuclear and gas without strong conditions in the taxonomy is against the economic interests of the European Union. It puts at stake the investment in the financial sector, which have already been made for sustainable finance, and it puts at stake also the credibility have to do now is we need to use the dynamic for a new German government in order to ask the European Commission to wait with the presentation of this part of the taxonomy in order to rebuild a consensus with France on the regulation of sustainable finance. And I hope it cannot be in the interest of Paris as a leading place for sustainable finance in Europe, as it can't be in the interest of Frankfurt as a leading place for sustainable finance, to have standards which consumers and market players will not accept. I'm confident that we can find a consensus with the new German government, with the French government, for a taxonomy which makes Europe a leading place. Europe cannot decide the French energy mix. It's up to the French to decide whether they want to continue to invest in nuclear. We think this is a bad choice. It is expensive. It is not safe. We will build now an energy system in Germany based on renewable energy without wasteful and dangerous nuclear energy. But it's a choice of the French, how they want to do it. I hope we will have soon majorities in France to overcome this nuclear addiction. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Yannick Jadot for the French perspective.
Merci.
Microphone, please.
Yes. Merci à toutes et à tous. Ça a été dit, on est face à un défi climatique majeur. La COP26 a démontré qu'il y avait encore un gouffre entre ce que nous devons faire, ce qui nous percute, et la réalité des engagements pris à Glasgow. Et nous savons que nous allons devoir, de toute façon, investir des milliers de milliards d'euros dans nos infrastructures énergétiques, et notamment dans la construction d'infrastructures de production d'électricité. Et donc là, le sujet de la taxonomie est absolument central pour savoir si l'Europe mobilise non pas simplement ses politiques publiques, mais mobilise l'ensemble du secteur du financement autour de cette transition énergétique. Et ce qu'on voit malheureusement dans ce débat sur la taxonomie, c'est un front des vieilles énergies contre les nouvelles énergies. Et on voit que toute la communication qui est faite en France et en Europe autour du nucléaire pour dire que c'est une énergie qui est une bonne énergie pour le climat est totalement contredite, y compris par la stratégie de défense du nucléaire. L'Europe est en retard. L'Europe a été malheureusement très silencieuse et n'a pas joué de rôle de leadership à Glasgow, mais aussi pour une bonne raison. C'est que vous avez une coalition au sein de l'Union européenne entre la France pour le nucléaire, la Pologne, dont on sait ses immenses réticences à avoir de l'ambition pour le climat, et puis tous les lobbies du gaz et tous les pays tenus par le gaz pour, au fond, casser tout le principe de la taxonomie. Et donc, c'est très, très grave ce qui est en train d'arriver. On voit bien que la défense française du nucléaire se construit au détriment du climat, au-delà de se construire au détriment d'une nouvelle industrie, des emplois et du pouvoir d'achat des Français et des Européens. Et pour la première fois, j'ai dû faire une dizaine ou une quinzaine de COP. Pour la première fois, j'ai vu malheureusement des pays européens, dont le Luxembourg, l'Allemagne et d'autres, être obligés de dénoncer dans une COP, être obligés de dénoncer un pays européen qui devrait incarner l'esprit de l'accord de Paris, qui devrait incarner l'ambition climatique avant tout. Ils ont été obligés de dénoncer la pression de la France pour casser, au nom du nucléaire, l'ambition européenne sur le climat. Et je trouve ça extrêmement dommageable. Il est temps, à quelques semaines de la présidence française de l'Union européenne, que la France cesse ce lobby insupportable qui, encore une fois, se fait au détriment du climat, au détriment de l'ambition européenne sur le climat et au détriment de tout ce que disent, Sven l'a rappelé, je conclurai là-dessus, les investisseurs financiers privés, les investisseurs financiers institutionnels qui disent bien, dans la taxonomie, il ne peut y avoir ni le nucléaire ni le gaz. Merci.
Thank you very much. So we're now happy to take your questions, and you can ask them here, of course, if you're physically here, and everyone who is participating remotely is also invited to ask questions. Yes, please.
Oui, bonjour.
Please indicate whom you are addressing the question to.
Lorenzo Consoli from Ska News Italy. Merci pour cette conférence de presse. Je voulais demander quelque chose concernant les éventuelles conditions que seraient mises par la Commission dans cette décision, dans sa déléguée pour l'introduction du gaz et du nucléaire. Sven Giegold a dit sans condition. Donc, on est contre l'introduction sans condition. Je vous demande, est-ce que pour les Verts, il y a des conditions qui peuvent rendre acceptable l'introduction temporaire, carrément temporaire, pour une période courte de transition, jusqu'en 2030 par exemple, du gaz et du nucléaire. Il y a des conditions concernant les émissions de CO2 de la part des installations de gaz. Il y a des conditions concernant pour le nucléaire certaines activités qui pourraient être introduites et pas vraiment la production, mais d'autres activités liées au nucléaire. Et dernière chose, excusez-moi la longueur, l'hydrogène. Est-ce que vous considérez que l'hydrogène produit par l'électricité nucléaire peut rentrer temporairement au moins dans la taxonomie? Donc l'hydrogène produit par l'électricité, qui est un hydrogène bleu carrément, mais est-ce qu'il pourrait temporairement être accepté dans la taxonomie, l'hydrogène nucléaire? Merci.
So is this a question maybe Yannick Jadot wants to answer? I just see that Sven Giegold cannot join anymore. So any questions addressed to Sven Giegold, we will be happy to answer after bilaterally.
The thing is that we're talking about investments in the future. So if you're putting it in the taxonomy now, then you're asking people to invest in that for the future. And whatever new gas power plant you're building now, that is going to run for the next couple of decades. So it's going to be there. So while gas is right now obviously on the market, has a role to play right now, we don't want it to play a role in 50 years, for example. If we want to be climate neutral by 2050, that's just not going to work. So that's why investments in gas are not sustainable when you're, and basically no matter what timeline you're putting in. On nuclear, it's even worse. Nuclear is not safe. There is zero idea about what to do with the waste, and that goes for every single bit of nuclear waste that is being produced in this moment. So it's not sustainable no matter where. And of course, that also goes for any forms of further energy carriers that you're producing with that energy as well. I mean, hydrogen can play a role if you have a surplus of renewable energy that can be transformed, but it's not a very effective one. So it might, in some cases, make sense, but certainly not to produce it out of fossil fuel, and that includes nuclear.
L'hydrogène, c'est pas une énergie. L'hydrogène, c'est un vecteur. Et de l'hydrogène produit avec du charbon, ça reste des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. De l'hydrogène produit avec par Siemens dans les années 90. Nous sommes en 2021. Ce réacteur qui devait coûter 3,3 milliards, aujourd'hui est évalué par la Cour des comptes en France à 20 milliards alors qu'il n'est toujours pas en fonctionnement. Plus de 10 ans de retard et 17 milliards de surcoût. 17 milliards d'euros de surcoût. Je ne sais pas ce que ça veut dire, un financement transitionnel de transition sur le nucléaire. Y compris le gouvernement français, quand il veut développer de nouveaux EPR, et qui d'ailleurs, de manière assez étonnante, dans ses calculs du coût du nucléaire en France, introduit déjà la taxonomie, ce qui est quand même sérieusement pervers du point de vue de la conception des coûts, dit que les EPR, de toute façon, ça sera 2045, 2046, 2047. Ça n'a aucun intérêt pour le climat aujourd'hui, aucun intérêt dans le combat pour le climat aujourd'hui, et vous voyez que tout ce concept de financement de transition ou de statut de transition pour le nucléaire n'a aucun sens au regard de ces délais.
We'll just wait for the transition to end. Minister Dieschbourg, maybe Carole, you also want to step in on this? And then we'll take some other questions. There are several more questions.
Juste pour soutenir ce que Yannick et Ska viennent de dire. Donc, c'est clair que ça ne fait pas du tout de sens de dire que c'est des transitions, périodes de transition, puisqu'on parle vraiment d'investissement dans le futur. Et là, il faut que ce soit crédible. Voilà. Je rejoins ce que mes deux collègues ont dit.
Et si je peux rajouter juste un petit point, la taxonomie, comme l'a dit Ska et comme l'a dit Sven, ça n'interdit pas les pays d'investir dans certaines technologies. Ça dit simplement que nous devons concentrer les financements les plus favorables vers la transition qui protège le climat. C'est tout ce que ça dit.
Thank you. Next question goes to Daniel.
Oui, bonjour, Daniel Weber de la radio publique luxembourgeoise 100.7. C'était un follow-up par rapport à la question de Lorenzo. J'ai bien entendu Sven Giegold dire qu'il pourrait y avoir des conditions et on constate que la déclaration qui a été signée à Glasgow était seulement a été signée par 4 pays, mais il y avait seulement le nucléaire dedans et pas le gaz. Donc, je me posais la question si c'était à cause de l'Allemagne qui ne serait pas d'accord de signer une déclaration qui inclut le gaz et si ça peut indiquer un peu la position de l'Allemagne, du futur gouvernement qui serait d'accord d'inclure le gaz dans la taxonomie, mais pas le nucléaire, ce qui serait un peu improbable au résultat. Donc, c'est ma question peut-être à la ministre luxembourgeoise et à Yannick Jadot aussi sur ce que vous pensez de cela. Merci.
Yeah, just to stress that in the COP we still had an old government. We don't have a new government yet in Germany. The old government certainly was very supportive of gas, as we see. And it certainly, I mean, gas is right here, right now. But again, the question is, what do we want to have as sustainable investment? How do we want to see the future? And that's, the gas needs to phase out. It needs to phase out rather quickly. What we need to phase in much more is renewable energy. And that's for us also important. Well, not just, it's very important, and that's the point. And if you want to say, okay, there's all sorts of investments, and still, as Yannick said, investments can still happen in gas. I mean, of course, no, we're not so happy about that, but investments can still happen in gas. The question is, what do you call sustainable green investment? And that is clear that that shouldn't include gas. Thanks.
Thank you, Carole, and then Yannick, and I would ask you for a short, quick answer because we have several more questions on the list.
Basically, we have been 5 countries joining the statement, so Germany, Austria, Portugal, Denmark, and Luxembourg. And we have been focusing, to be clear, on nuclear, because there was also a big nuclear push and declarations on the COP. So we focused for this press conference at the COP, a very short one, to make a very clear statement on nuclear-free taxonomy.
Just to be, juste pour être clair, effectivement, je voudrais juste confirmer, Sven est parti, mais ces déclarations régulières sont très claires. Je veux dire, pour exclure le gaz et le nucléaire, de la taxonomie, qu'il n'y ait pas d'ambiguïté de ce point de vue-là. Après, il y a un point, vous voyez bien que c'est un sujet profondément démocratique, ce dont nous parlons. Et un des éléments dans le combat que nous menons, c'est aussi d'éviter qu'il y ait un acte délégué de la Commission, parce qu'on voit bien comment, y compris Ursula von der Leyen, après le dernier sommet, a été fortement bousculée, pressée par le président Macron sur la question du nucléaire. Donc on veut qu'évidemment, tout ça relève d'une décision démocratique et ça passe par le Parlement européen.
Thank you. I have a question from Michael Gritz, and then we will take 3 more questions. One of it is in written. So, Michael.
Yeah, my question concerns exactly this. What will be the decision process? Could you help me with that? So how far the European Parliament is involved in that at the end of the day?
Ska, do you maybe want to step in on this?
Well, we're dealing with a delegated act, so we have to gather our forces, but we're certainly going to try to do that. Plus, of course, also try to use our influence before. So we're going to use all our parliamentary possibilities, plus also our public possibilities in that, and with talks with the Commission and so on and so forth. So we're trying to do everything on that. Plus, of course, also working together with our Greens in government, for example, like with Carole, in order to make sure that this also is a concern that's taken up in Council, as we know it is.
Thank you. And then I have a question in written, which is from David Abiago, and I think it's addressed to Yannick Jadot. I will just read it out. According to a non-paper, our French friends appear to have linked up with Poland to try and get both nuclear and fossil gas into the taxonomy. Is this a sign of politics to come in the future, with France supporting other more conservative climate policy despite professing its climate credentials?
Tout est résumé dans la question. Je ne peux que confirmer, y compris le gouvernement français n'a pas contredit l'idée que ce papier qui avait circulé et qui a été fuité était bien un papier à l'initiative de la France. D'ailleurs, étonnamment, dans ce papier qui est écrit en anglais, le mot gaz intervient plusieurs fois avec un Z et non pas avec un S comme on l'écrit en anglais. Et il est évident que c'est ce que nous avons dénoncé et c'est ce que, encore une fois, des gouvernements européens, dont le Luxembourg, l'Allemagne, le Danemark, l'Autriche et j'oublie le dernier, avec des soutiens quand même affirmés de l'Espagne et de l'Irlande, ont affirmé que cette coalition nucléaire-gaz était une coalition anti-climat, était une coalition anti-Green Deal, était une coalition qui remet en cause l'ambition européenne et le leadership européen sur le climat grâce à son indispensable transition énergétique. Et puis, il faut rappeler que la taxonomie, ça n'est pas que de l'énergie. La taxonomie, c'est ce qui est durable. Et donc, que ce soit le gaz ou le nucléaire, les dégâts et le caractère non soutenable de ces énergies vont au-delà, évidemment, de la seule question énergétique. On pense particulièrement aux déchets nucléaires.
So we also have questions, for example, from Charlotte Wirth, and then I will take another 2 questions because we're running a bit out of time. Charlotte, please.
Yes, I have 2 questions. One is for Ms. Dieschbourg. It's about, well, basically the Luxembourgish position. Is it a closed position, given that the finance minister recently had a more moderate position on including gas and nuclear that was much more, well, let's say less clear and less radical than the one that Ms. Dieschbourg is now stating? And would Luxembourg, for example, join a lawsuit by Austria if nuclear would be included? Would that be an option? And the other question is this joint kind of, or not, or rather this separate treatment of nuclear and gas that Germany kind of advances now. Is that sustainable at all, given that the strategy of France, for example, is to treat both together in order to get the Commission include gas? So what sense is there in separating the two, knowing that they will be handled together afterwards? So will Germany then back off from nuclear and kind of lessen the support of this initiative, or what will happen then?
Okay, Carole, maybe the first to answer. Maybe just wait a second, we cannot hear you yet. Or maybe Ska, do you want to take the first answer?
Okay.
Okay, you're in.
In order to answer Charlotte Wicht, the position of Luxembourg is very clear on this, and we had a discussion also with the finance minister, who said he was misunderstood because, and he stated it very clearly also in the German press, but also on an international stage, that we do not want to see gas and nuclear in, which is very clear position of Luxembourg. And I may also say that the Prime Minister also made statements about the importance that for us it's really not a solution for the climate crisis because it's far too low. So I fully I can say that the Luxembourgish position did not change on that, and we discussed this in government even last week, because we also discussed if it would be possible to join Austria. So we are still analyzing if we can join Austria in the lawsuit that they give, if there will be a nuclear included.
Well, I have to say, I'm not really in a position to tell you how Germany will act in the future. That's, I don't know. Obviously, maybe we get more news very soon about general positions. You know the Green position, and we're the Greens EFA Group here in the European Parliament, and we will do our utmost to get gas and nuclear out in the parliamentary procedure.
Okay, one very last question goes to Angelo, and then we need to finish.
Hello. Okay. Thank you very much, Angelo, member from ANSA. I would have two questions, very quick. One is practical information. What should we expect about timing? I guess before 8th of December. If you have any other information, I would appreciate you to share it. And another one is a political question. If taxonomy does not prevent national decisions on investment on national energy mix, why the insistence for the past year in every legislative act passing through the parliament to introduce the alignment of taxonomy with EU public subsidies? Is taxonomy about markets and about a golden standard for markets and investment, financial markets, or is it something for public, is a guideline for public investments? Thank you.
On the date, we can't really say anything because it's up to the Commission. We would say, let's not rush. Let's do it properly, and therefore, let's not just, let's not rush. On including it in other legislation, I mean, the point is that there's also public investments, and putting down guidelines for private investments has implications, that's for sure, also on public support. And we will also do public investments, or we will entice private investments, which with our legislation will ask for that. And that's why it's also, that's why it's in all sorts of legislations. And again, yes, it's absolutely possible that investors also go for gas if they decide to do so. The question is just what will be labeled sustainable? And I think what should be labeled as sustainable is only things that are sustainable and nothing else.
Thank you, Ska. I think these were the closing words because we need to, or Yannick, you want to add something? And then we need to finish.
Juste un mot rapide. L'énergie dans le traité de Lisbonne a un statut ambigu. C'est-à-dire que ça reste très largement une compétence nationale, mais évidemment, c'est une compétence nationale qui est de plus en plus réduite, puisque l'Europe légifère sur l'efficacité énergétique, les renouvelables, et maintenant la taxonomie. Donc, au fond, il y a toute une partie des politiques énergétiques aujourd'hui qui est encadrée par l'Europe, d'où l'importance de Fit for 55, d'où l'importance de la taxonomie, mais il y a une partie qui relève de la compétence et des souverainetés nationales, ce qui pour le nucléaire a toujours posé de gros problèmes pour nos voisins, puisque nous pouvons décider seuls de construire une centrale nucléaire qui, si elle explose, pourrait faire disparaître le Luxembourg ou certaines régions allemandes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everyone for joining. And if there are any questions left, please just ask us bilaterally. We're happy to answer them. Thank you.